no one is that good. When someone's that good, they're cheating. They have to be. The Ancestral Followers are called Master Hunters, but accuracy like this is beyond superhuman strength or vision. This next level archery is beyond anyone, even Lars Anderson. The mystery of their archery and the answer behind it reveals a beautiful people and culture, and opens a window into some of the deepest secrets of the magical world of Elden Ring. Because this mastery is not strength, it is spirit, and these horned folk are much, much more than what they appear. So big lore spoilers ahead. When we first arrive in their area, we are limited by our first impressions. Every area in Elden Ring is challenging, so idling around and sightseeing, be it at the capital, the academy, or the mountaintops, is an enchanting idea, but it's not practical in reality, and a trip to visit the Ancestral Followers has the same problems. Anyone visiting ends up panicked, running away from lightning bubbles that cannot be harmed, or dodging the attacks of the huge horned residents. Try as you might, some will club you to death or knock you down with arrows that hit even the most experienced Souls player. These are definitely not perfect conditions for lore sleuthing. Despite that, we all enjoyed these underground challenges, at least for the most part, as well as the profound beauty of the area and the boss at its end. Many have discussed the reuse of bosses in the game, but we felt, and we feel many agree, that we were very happy to see a second Ancestor Spirit boss. One of our first impressions was their names, the Ancestral Followers, the Ancestral Spirits. We also noticed that they were exceedingly strong and brawny, and items described them as such, just in case we needed to be told. They were obviously very spiritual, between the use of their magic, the object of their faith, and their unique dances and chants. Before they become aggressive, it is quite pleasant to pretend to be one of them, sitting by a group as they stamp around a minor Erdtree, or beside a shaman chanting a haunting melody. Next was how they looked. Their clothes all seemed to be made with the raw materials of nature. Leather sandals, fur, animal pelts. Their bodies are extremely tall and muscular, with long arms and small heads relative to their body. The Ancestral Followers' ashes call them horned folk, and we find large horns upon their heads. The final first impression was of how in harmony they are with nature. They forage their food from nature, while animals crowd around them unafraid. What's more, the animals don't only go about their business, they often even follow the foragers during their tasks. Their tools and weapons seem to be made from plants or the corpses of beasts, clubs made from jawbones and bows made from horns, for example. They are hunter-gatherers with a spiritual religion that seems to unite their approach. All of these first impressions made a pattern that seemed familiar. These first impressions, what we observed, the item descriptions, even their names, were some of the first entries in a note we labelled the Ancestral Followers, and we put this in a file called Cultures Before the Erdtree. Then we moved along in the game, and we started thinking about some of the more apparent mysteries. Outer gods, the Erdtree itself. What on earth is an Elden Beast anyway? But we may have moved on too soon. The Ancestral Followers and the Ancestor Spirits are much more subtle compared to a lot of the game, but they are essential to the lore. This is because their culture is in many ways removed from, and even opposite to, the mainstream culture in the lands between. In this video, we aim to show that if we can understand their culture, it is a shortcut to the fundamental rules of the world in Elden Ring. If Elden Ring's deep lore is a distant ocean, understanding the Erdtree and the Outer Gods is akin to walking the great distance to the coast, where the Ancestral Followers provide a river. As we started to discern them, we seemed to move much more easily towards understanding, with greater and greater insights along the way. Both journeys can get to the same answers, but the Ancestral Followers might be a more tranquil route. So let's go downstream. Before we start on this journey, we just want to clarify that when looking at the inspirations for the Ancestrals, we are trying to show how the beauty of certain rituals and cultures in the real world may have helped From Software create a unique and compelling fictional world. No other comparisons are being made when we look at what may have influenced the Ancestral Followers culture. It's also important to emphasize that the video is not attempting to make value comparisons between different cultures or societies. Additionally, any observations made about the roles of males and females in the Ancestral Followers cultures or in Elden Ring are based only on what we believe is depicted in the game and the intentions of the game's designers. We have tried hard to be sensitive and respectful in our research, but we welcome any feedback or comments if we have inadvertently made any errors. The Ancestral Followers fell out of mind until we stumbled upon them again, this time above ground. But nonetheless, amidst more ancient ruins, they were yet again in a place that gave a sense of the ancients. Everywhere we ended up finding them gave this ancient atmosphere. We even find one wandering alone in the Lake of Rot, in yet another ancient realm of the lands between. This all, once again, gave the sense of a pattern of age. So, in our minds, the impression was becoming more fixed. They're an ancient society from before the Erdtree. Possible inspirations from the real world came to mind. Peoples from the world over who had a culture on their native land before a new society arrived, eventually bringing war, until the newcomers became the primary power with a new belief system. Not only did the sense of having to flee and keep their distance from the Erdtree society fit this impression, but so did the aspects of the Ancestral Followers' spiritual worship. Ancient tribes all over the world hold deep reverence for antlers and the species that carry them, too many to list. Such societies were generally established before the intrusion of urban or literate societies. So, here was another ancient society before the Erdtree, just like the Beastmen, the Nox, or the Dragons. However, we think we were wrong. Forgive us. We will be wrong again, and likely a fair number of times, as we work to resolve the mysteries of Elden Ring for this beautiful community. But, on our replay of Elden Ring, combing through the game for details and insights, something struck us that we had noticed, but perhaps not understood. Their horns. What are horns famous for in Elden Ring? The budding horn is related to the crucible from before the Erdtree. Omen horns are evidence of something anti-Erdtree, and also share similarities to the crucible and pre-Erdtree era. Beasts and dragons have horns. Old things in general have horns. So horns are very important across many areas, but more than most, the Ancestral Followers obsess about horns. They worship a multi-horned beast. They have huge horns sprouting from their heads. Horns are used in many of their weapons. They carry out rituals and pray for new buds upon these horns. Horns are before the Erdtree, and the Ancestral Followers have horns, so that's more evidence they're from before the Erdtree, right? Except the horns on their head can be dropped. Now, we knew this because we picked up the item, yet for some reason we didn't think they wore the horns. We thought it was just adapted as a drop for us as players to be able to wear the horns, but on analysing their models, their horns can be removed, just like us. So they do not grow them, they wear them, which got us to look closer and begin noticing more. Such as their name, Ancestral Followers. This name feels so ancient, like the ancestral spirit, this majestic beast with so many sprouting antlers and its ethereal music. Yes, this is a beast from the ancient times, and the accompanying culture that worships it must be an ancient one. Except the word ancestral doesn't necessarily mean ancient. Ancestral is defined as of, belonging to, or inherited from an ancestor or ancestors. So in theory, something could produce offspring very quickly, such as a rabbit, and have many offspring, making it a very distant ancestor, and yet still do this during a relatively short lifetime. The European rabbit can bear young at 6 months old and lives around 9 years, so it could meet its own great, add another 10 greats and then some, grandson or granddaughter. So it is the relation of ancestry that is important, not age specifically. And we know from Elden Ring that relations are much more flexible than in our world. There are many richly nuanced relations that go well beyond just blood. The first impression of the word ancestral continues to unravel if we dig deeper. Such as when we find a shaman standing guard. And what are they guarding? Not an ancestral spirit body, but a chest. Something which stands out amidst all their natural ways. Guarding a chest containing a material possession in itself is already out of place from the rest of their culture that focuses on nature. FromSoft has always focused on themes of greed and possession, so for the Ancestral Followers to possess a chest feels almost taboo. In a culture which clearly lacks a firm system of ownership, be it property or land, they have one chest, hidden at the land's edge, beyond an archway, in a secluded room, guarded by a shaman. So what is in the chest that is so precious to them that warrants hoarding it away in secret? An ancestral infant's head. Skull of a very young ancestral spirit. Just think how many sproutings it might bear. It is young, new. It has no sproutings, or perhaps 2 if you count the tips it starts with. And yet, it is still called an ancestral spirit. It is hoped that it will bear many sproutings, and yet it is still called ancestral, further illustrating that the name ancestral is more about relation than time, becoming or creating a linchpin, a central node upon which to attach other things in relation. So, the name ancestral was yet another misleading illusion. The next thing that got us thinking was something that kept being repeated like an obsession in the item descriptions. The ancestrals are always referenced as being away from the Erdtree's influence. They are always compared to the Erdtree. The ancestral spirit is a phenomenon beyond the purview of the Erdtree. The ancestral followers live a distance from the Erdtree, says Shaman Furs. This language is almost as though the Erdtree and its society is a vital part of the locations of their settlements, as though it was taken into consideration. So, what if this deliberate referencing is because they were actually not so ancient, and had in fact left this modern society to return to nature much more recently? After all, Mog and his planned dynasty also lies deep within the earth, surrounded by structures from the distant past. But his dynasty is not ancient. And so, we believe that the Ancestral Followers are closer in age to Mog's new order than to the ancient beastmen. We then decided to really dig into the evidence of the timeline of the Ancestral Followers. The first damning piece of evidence that undermines their ancient past is nothing. Nothingness. If they are so ancient, there should be some evidence in history of their interactions, their culture, their wars, or something. Instead, we find nothing about them in any weapons, spells, or items that reference the era before the Erdtree. We find nothing in anyone's dialogue referencing them as an ancient people in history. We find nothing in any stories, whether in-game, in interviews, in guidebooks, you name it. Miriel, the greatest history buff in the lands between, makes no mention of them. We find nothing on any sword monuments. This nothingness is a terrible coincidence. Consider Stormvale, the Nox, or Farum Azula. With all of these, the fact that they were pre-Erdtree is revealed eventually. The pattern to this discovery is random and unpredictable, be it through subtle references, environmental clues, or even interviews with the developers. But somewhere, at some time, something is likely to show a placement in the timeline. And yet, the Ancestral Followers possess only one item that references any sort of history. What is this item? The Spiral Horned Shield, which says, once given to a tarnished warrior who cultivated close ties to the Ancestral Followers. While this was no doubt a beautiful connection and a beautiful story, becoming tarnished was something that happened after the Erdtree. Once again, the Ancestral Followers are referenced in relation to the Erdtree. Beyond that, the history of the Ancestral Followers is blank. But what about their neighbouring cultures? They are close to Ancient Dynasties, and yet there is no evidence of any interactions. No warring with them, no indications they shared culture, no alliances, no intrigues or conspiracies, nothing. Another piece of evidence is the language used in the item descriptions, and anything else that describes their culture. This seems almost deliberate on the part of From Software. First, let's look at some items from other cultures for comparison. The Dragon Lord, whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time, is said to have been Elden Lord in the age before the Erdtree. Two great rivers flow beneath the lands between, the Siofra and the Ainzel. The vast region is said to be the grave of civilizations that flourished before the Erdtree. In the time where there was no Erdtree, death was burned in ghost flame. Deathbirds were the keepers of that fire. The warped remains of priests who searched for revelation in service of the Ancient Dynasty. These are just a few examples. The pattern continues for other cultures, whether it's the Giants, the people of Zamor, or even the Onyx Lords. The language used does not try to hide the facts away. Now, listen to these examples from the Ancestral Followers. Ancestral Followers' Ashes, a spirit of the horned folk who eschew letters and metalworking. Or from the Jawbone Axe, they disdain metal. Neither of these give us any time information. In other cases that reference craft, we can glean much more. The Beastman's Cleaver says, "It's clear the Beastmen possess knowledge beyond human ken." This can implicitly tell us a lot, but for the Ancestral Followers we get eschew. Really? Eschew is defined as to deliberately avoid using, to abstain from. Not didn't adopt or gave up, not never learned or turned away from. No, they chose eschew. Hunter-gatherers could eschew technology as it came into existence, but so could we eschew using computers today. And when it comes to the Ancestral Followers, this ambiguity is all we get, that or silence. But is that just a coincidence? With FromSoft, we think not. Let us now look for horns other than the headband. What do we mean? Well, it is repeatedly mentioned that the Ancestral Followers are obsessed about buds, which is, unsurprisingly now, somewhat ambiguous. Does it mean animal horns? Or the buds of plant life? Either way, once their headbands are removed, we cannot see any sprouting buds of any kind. Even if we remove their garments in the game files, we see some impressive muscles, but no horns. If they were an ancient people and had been hoping and chanting for new buds through the ages, Shouldn't they have appeared by now? Even Mog's Albinaurics have developed some. And yet, there are none. Some can drop a budding horn, but we wonder if this is harvested from other beasts, just like the pelts they wear. If it is theirs, it is still quite limited compared to their hopes, or what other recent dynasties have achieved. In fact, the language around this hope reflects its future obsession. They are certain to sprout from their very flesh. They are certain to implies a future event. It hasn't occurred yet. Indeed, this language sounds a lot like the language used for the Mogwin dynasty. Glory to his inevitable reign, the reigning lord and hierarch of the coming dynasty of Mogwin. Language obsessed about a future of a relatively young order. With the horn headband removed, they are certainly not beast-like in other ways. They wear sandals to walk on the ground, showing their feet aren't fully adapted to nature. They hunt with bows and build quivers and axes, showing they use tools. In Elden Ring, it is ambiguous what exactly constitutes humanity. However, in a colloquial sense, they are certainly human or human-like. Importantly, they are never called demi-human, beast-like, or less than human anywhere in item descriptions or dialogue. They may be somewhat different to human. After all, everything changes in this world relative to the magics or natures things come into contact with. Just look at the possible rot versions of the Ancestrals that were cut, or the sorcerers we find who have turned inorganic. Many of our starting classes as a Tarnished have quite distinct takes on humanity, so we can say that overall they are certainly at least very close to human. After all, we would expect a significant change if a group followed a totally different lifestyle over many generations in the lands between. So we feel that they are human anatomically, even if there has been some adaptation over time, and that this adaptation could easily have taken place in a timeline that started since the Erdtree. Another clue to their timeline is where we find Ancestrals and evidence of their culture in the lands between. Remember the language that obsesses about being at a distance from the Erdtree, away from its influence, beyond the purview of the Erdtree? So let's think about this approach if the Ancestral Followers were truly ancient. What happens to those who possess an ancient culture when it is disturbed by newcomers? Consistently, across many countries throughout history, land is taken. To this day, there are many land disputes involving indigenous peoples who in the past were forced to relocate. A more well-known example in history was the Trail of Tears, during which thousands of Cherokee, Muskogee Creek, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw people were forcibly removed from their homes. This was in the early 19th century and was sanctioned by the US government, who had passed the Indian Removal Act. This authorized the forced relocation of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands in the southeastern United States to Indian territory. Of course, if a people have changed location, there is usually some evidence of their departure in history, and in the lands between. We see this in-game in several places, from Farum Azula and their beasts taking to the skies, with remnants of the culture still grounded, or the Nox banished from the surface to deep below, yet the evidence of culture lives on up above. Whether deserted or taken over, we can always find evidence of what came before. If the Ancestral Followers had been part of an ancient culture, and only avoided the Erdtree after it became the centre of the dominant culture in the lands between, then there should be locations from which they were forced out. What we mean to say is, if for some reason the people or philosophy of the Erdtree society means that the Ancestrals need to keep a distance from them, then wouldn't there have been some Ancestrals that needed to move from an old home? And if they were originally part of the Erdtree society as Ancestral Followers, and chose to distance themselves from it, then there would be evidence of their movement. But in the lands between, we find no evidence of their relocation. Nothing that correlates with the Ancestral Followers' culture is found in places that they are not. We only find evidence of the Ancestral Followers in the places where they live now. We do not find any evidence of the replacement of rule, as in Stormveil, or of departure, as with Beastmen. What if we look at what we can find and examine the sense of ancient in them? One of the first things that makes us feel their antiquity are the pillars we light to access the ancestral spirits. We believe these pillars date back to the ancient past and are part of an ancient dynasty which existed well before the Erdtree. These pillars, as well as the iconic statues often found with the ancestrals, give the followers a general impression of age by association. But in fact, that is all it is. Association, or rather, adoption. These columns are not of their making. They have taken these columns from older societies. Why? We will look into their belief system in a moment and show how many of their beliefs may align with the belief systems of older cultures. But first of all, let's take a look at the evidence for when. We find these pillars in many places in the lands between, but these places are connected with societies we know to be older than the Erdtree. There is one notable exception, where we find Mog, but Mog has also used ancient artifacts for his new dynasty, a dynasty that departs from the Erdtree. So the physical pillars used by Mog are also exceedingly old. And all these ancient pillars are fairly similar. They have the same markings, drawings, and runes. They have the same proportions, are roughly the same size and shape, and are made from similar material. However, those of the Ancestral Followers have two noticeable differences. At the bottom and top of their pillars are two alterations. To allow us to light the pillars and gain access to the ancestral spirit, we light a basin at the foot of the pillar, and at the top is a remarkable change. There is a small well carved into the stone, from which flame can emerge. There is no stone with a carved well at the top of any other such pillar throughout the lands between, other than by the Ancestral Followers. As well as it being altered, it almost seems that the stone is of a lighter, newer colour. On closer inspection, the carved basins have a pool of oil, which explains how they stay lit. Finally, and something that really pins down the Ancestrals as after the creation of these pillars, is the fact that we know the Ancestral Followers eschew letters. But what is on the pillars that light up clearly with magic? Runes. Letters. If these people have never used letters, they could not build these pillars. But more importantly, it would go against their fundamental beliefs. These pillars are not their own, and the reuse of the monuments of more ancient cultures shows their true story. The story of a more recent return to the past, not an ancient society's rejection of the present. So this is the timeline of the Ancestral Followers as we see it, at least so far, as their timeline isn't over. It's clear that they have a future, because their system seems to be working. Who knows, they may have a future that involves more than keeping a distance. The weapon Winged Greathorn says it is made to reap the lives of beings which experience no sprouting. Perhaps with enough life and enough sprouting, the Ancestral Followers could be a force to be reckoned with. In time, they might not be so reclusive, but instead a warlike people, striving to rid the lands between of all distorting manipulations of nature. With their timeline established, we will take a deeper look at their culture and gain a deeper understanding of what the Followers are all about. Now that we know they departed from the Erdtree society in their past, it makes sense that we find in the present that distance from the Erdtree is still of vital importance. We never find them too close to the Erdtree, and the majority are even underground. It seems that the Greater Will and the Erdtree Society fail to pierce underground as effectively as they influence above. The sites of grace themselves are not able to draw grace into them like they do on the surface. Below ground is also where other societies that have not aligned themselves with Leyendell have managed to sustain. And below the earth may be more than it seems in the lands between. The culture they nurture here, away from the danger of the Golden Order Crusaders, is deeply connected to nature itself. They sustain their bodies from nature, hunting and gathering. Their clothes and tools are from nature. Their worship is of a creature of nature. They have a faith in nature, that nature is abundant and will always provide, so long as it is treated with care. And while nature is balanced, it is also dangerous and powerful. It must be respected. And part of that respect is trust. Nature must be trusted despite its afflictions to be the best system there can be. These hardships are necessary, even if the why is mysterious. To believe nature can be modified or outdone risks invoking the wrath of nature, and may corrupt or even defile the great generator, the universal mother of life itself. This respect in nature runs through everything they do. Not only do they take what nature furnishes when foraging or hunting, but they do not waste anything. They use many parts of the carcass. They dress themselves with pelts. They arm themselves with horns and attach teeth to their arrows. And the animals they hunt are unafraid of them, which means they do not hunt recklessly. They chant to all the nature around them, not only for their own ancestor spirit. The mirror of these traditions rooted in nature is a rejection of techniques that go against nature. We are told by the ancestral follower Ashes that they have rejected certain crafts that are essential to other societies in the lands between, specifically letters and metalworking. On the surface, letters and metalworking sound similar to crafts in our own world. Both are of great importance to the function of society, but in the lands between, these carry much more significance. Let us first address metalworking. Metals have some important roles in the lands between. Gold, first of all, has a remarkable quality, and metalworking with gold allowed Mikola to stop the progress of rot in his sister, Melania. Copper can channel the will, allowing swords to fly in deadly arcs by thought alone. But if we have to choose one example of metalworking to illustrate what the ancestral followers are giving up, it would be silver. Because how do we birth ourselves anew? With a larval tear, the core of a silver tear. Silver, or what we might call quicksilver, is very linked to rebirth in the lands between, the renewing of the soul in another body. While this may happen naturally, as colours and elements in the lands between are of course naturally occurring, metalworking is the manipulation of these things. It is the imposing of your will onto the naturally occurring essences of nature. So the ancestral followers do not merely reject metalworking in the sense of our world, but they reject metalworking in Elden Ring. They reject control over rebirth and life. It is quite a power to ignore, and is just one illustration out of many metals. This demonstrates the unwavering faith the ancestral followers have in their belief system. The next craft the ancestral followers reject is letters. Once again, in our society, a rejection of letters would still be very significant. It would mean a loss of a great part of education, entertainment, communication, and so on. To be illiterate in the modern world is extremely challenging, yet this significance in our world again masks the even greater significance of this craft in the lands between. To reject letters in the world of Elden Ring means even more. To reject letters means to reject the power of runes. One cutscene in particular can clearly and elegantly demonstrate the sheer power of runes. As we climb into a humble coffin beside the waterfall in Nokron, we surprisingly start to rise. And we can see the reason. Letters, runes appear in the air, unlike when they are bound up so deeply in rings as to be invisible. We rise up the whole height of an enormous waterfall, reversing for a time the encompassing power of gravity. Runes are quite literally a power to affect and influence the laws of nature themselves. In this example, it reverses gravity. Runes can control the flow of these laws and change it depending on your whim. Once again, we see the enormous devotion of the Ancestral Followers to not make use of this power, and the deep commitment they therefore have to their own beliefs. Both of these rejections show that their belief and culture revolve around a faith in nature exactly how it is, a trust that nature will provide for them, and through that, a profound humility. They do not believe they could improve nature, and will not attempt to change it. This philosophy is not only shown in these consequential rejections, but even in the smallest details of their most simple crafts. It seems that they not only reject metalworking, but any sort of sharpening. They use a blunt axe, the jawbone axe. The whole axe is furnished by nature. It is meant to be that way. So they reject the possibility of sharpening an edge. The weapon forgoes a bladed edge. Their arrowheads seem to be made from teeth, which are naturally sharp. Nature provides what is needed. If nature furnishes something sharp, it is meant to be used for its sharpness. If it furnishes something as blunt, then it is meant to be used as such, in the jawbone's case, as a bludgeoning weapon. They show in their actions their belief that nature provides what is required. Another set of items that reveal their belief system are their charms. We have established that colours and their natures are inherent across cultures in our colour video, and how, whether it is the Ancestrals, the Erdtree faction, or dragons, these colours maintain their nature. What is interesting is that amongst the ancestral charms, only one is mentioned as being precious to the followers. This is the mottled horn charm. In fact, this charm is the only horn charm given the honour of being worn as a necklace, so the item is uniquely called the mottled necklace. This vividly coloured necklace has many colours and therefore many natures. It shares natures related to focus and sleep, immunity and poison, robustness and vitality, the fire of life. This sort of varied coloured item would not be so welcome in Erdtree society, and the only people we find in Leyendal who wear many colours are buried deep below the capital. This is a sign of the plurality of the Ancestral Followers' beliefs, their openness to all that is found in existence, if it occurs naturally. If it is natural, trust it, even if things are in opposition to each other, even if they cause pain or loss, even if they compete. Unlike the belief in one true God that is held as law by the Erdtree society, the Ancestrals are pluralist. Not only do they worship the many competing aspects of nature, but they even allow natural competition as part of their very system. After all, we fight more than one ancestral spirit, but only one is a king. We can guess that one may be up and coming in spiritual power, and yet they do not deny the existence of this other ancestral spirit and help its growth. They take this even further with the deep care and attention they give to new potential ancestral spirits, chanting young heads into new buds. All life is allowed, and there can be more than one vying for place. The strongest will take the crown. This strength wins approach as a belief is a much more ancient one the Erdtree society has moved away from. Here, in the culture of the Ancestral Followers, they have returned to this belief. The true king is the strongest. Now that we have laid the groundwork of their culture, let's have a look at their broader place in art. While the Ancestral Followers' culture, design, and history is unique to Elden Ring, they seem to be part of the wider Shamanic Archetype. Whether in mythology, real history, or Magic the Gathering, From Software has placed the essence of the Shamanic Archetype in the soul of this group. This archetype, whose philosophy is found in reality, and frequently in mythology and artistic works, usually presents corresponding beliefs to the ones we mentioned earlier. Faith in nature as the greatest process, faith in its abundance despite its harshness, and a respect to not tamper with it, because without these processes, all would perish. This archetype has many representations in art, whether as wood elves, fairies, druids, or representations of shamans in works that inspired Miyazaki, such as Magic the Gathering. And they all are always absolutely minimal in the damage they cause to their environment. Their actions and their tools go with the stream of nature. And one process at the very core of nature is death. All shamanic belief systems respect and value this part of life as a process. It is one rejected by the Golden Order, and as we become more familiar with the Ancestrals, we can see that the life-death cycle is central to their beliefs. How essential life and death are as a part of a complete whole is best shown from the ancestral spirit's horn. Thus does new life grow from death, and from death one obtains power. This acceptance of death as a part of life is perhaps the most important thing that defines the way of life and belief system of the Ancestral Followers. They reject any attempts to control life and death. There is no avoidance or interruption of it. It is welcomed and embraced. All of nature's systems are respected, but this system, more than any other, is sacred. Given that natural death has been rejected from the current order, with the Rune of Death sealed, this may also help with their timeline. Their focus on the importance of the natural life-death cycle makes it likely that the Ancestral Followers left mainstream society after the Rune of Death was sealed. This belief can be found in everything: what they wear, what they use, even expressing itself on their faces, almost physically embodying this obsession with life and death. Not only do they not alter what they take from nature, but so much of what they take is from death. They give new life to a corpse by using it as a weapon. From death comes power. The teeth made for their arrows are from death. The jaw worn around the shaman's neck is from death. Their coloured charms are from death. The horns that make their bow are from death. From death comes power. They nourish themselves from death, and we can even see them foraging, perhaps for mushrooms, an example of nature turning death into energy. The followers trust that nature will give energy back from death in abundance, and to look at the Ancestral Followers, they certainly don't lack in abundance. The majority of item descriptions referring to the Ancestral Followers mention death, life, or the power from death. This is not only passive or received from nature, it is active. The description of the winged greathorn states it is made to reap the lives of those who experience no sprouting. Reap meaning cut or gather a crop for harvest. Once again, a sense of the power of life from death. And what of the remarkable object of their faith, the ancestral spirits? How deeply are they connected to life from death? Before even meeting these creatures, we have to follow a ritual of pillar lighting. As we move through the area, we light a fire at the base of pillars. Flame, an energy that almost seems alive, sprouts once we light a basin filled with what looks like bones. A life from death. The pillars have oil at the top of them, and what is oil but the perfect representation of energy from death? It is also no accident that these monuments themselves are very like a horn. This symbolic power from death lights the tip, not unlike a horn sprouting with life and glowing. Once we have lit the pillars, we can go to meet the ancestral spirit itself. Not the young one, a dead skull with the potential of sprouting and power, life from death, but a mature one. But of course we do not meet it at first. Instead, we meet its remains, a corpse, death. We touch these remains, around one of which the Ancestral Followers sing and worship. In order to go and meet the ancestral spirit full of life, we must first touch death. As we interact, the body gives off a spiritual energy, and the air glows with it. We are transported by its power. But this is only the first example of the magic of death in a truly remarkable boss fight. On entering the ancestral spirit's domain, we are reminded of its name. It is the ancestral spirit, not the ancestral deer. It seems to be less physically alive and instead spiritually alive. Walking into the room, we see on the floor around us life literally sprouting from death. There are countless sprouting fungi, new life born from plant and animal remains. The next feature of the room that strikes us as embodying the life and death cycle are the spirit animals that roam, whose power will come into play during combat. And then we fight the ancestral spirit itself. Unlike the spirit creatures at its feet, this creature is much larger and more powerful than its remains. During the intimacy of the fight, we can see the ancestral spirit up close. It is powerful, but its appearance is an appearance of death. It looks skeletal, a much larger version of the dead remains used to get here. It even looks like it has been gutted or dead long enough that lots of what wasn't skeletal has rotted away, its chest cavity now hollow and open. In attacking us, it displays even more of the power it draws from death. And as the drama of the battle continues, the spirit animals remain uninterested. But if we manage to bring down the ancestral spirit substantially, it then uses its power to draw the surrounding spirit animals' energy into it. The spirits fall down, dead. And yet, the power of these spirits does not die. Their energy enters the ancestral spirit, revitalizing it. Its horns glow with power and its HP recovers. In development, its horns would have grown physically after drawing in their life, but this was cut for release. But this is not all. Life from death comes again later in the fight. The ancestral spirit can suddenly, and confusingly for the player, seem to die. It cries out in pain, while its legs crumple beneath it and falls to the floor violently. It is a death animation, and yet in the end, this spirit creature does not seem to need this body. It emerges from another spirit animal in the boss room, killing it and bursting forth from its body. Its new body manifests in front of us, expanding and growing in the air. Its limbs sprout out with a gruesome sound effect. There is power from death, and yet, is the original beast truly dead? For this power from the previous beast's soul is not only its vitality, the actual nature of the beast is now within the ancestral spirit. It attacks differently depending on which beast it has emerged from. And even more eerie, even its cry alters to sound more like the beast it has become a part of. All of this, however peculiar and mysterious its mechanics, is the life and death cycle, life and power from death. With the regal ancestor's remembrance, we can get the ancestral spirit's horn. It shows the same beautiful glowing and sprouting that lit up the antlers of the ancestral spirit during the fight. The description says that a number of new growths bud from the antler-like horns of the fallen king, each glowing with light. Thus does new life grow from death, and from death one obtains power. The horn of the ancestral spirit, the centre of their worship, perfectly captures the Ancestral Followers' philosophy of life from death, and even clearer than the description is its function when equipped. If we kill enemies, it restores our focus points. This was the first episode in our two-part series diving into the Ancestral Followers. If you enjoyed the video, then make sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications to make sure you don't miss part 2.